Hello, welcome to Workplace Wake Up. I'm Jen Shaw. Every week, I spend about 15 minutes covering key legal developments, introducing you to interesting guests, and providing some entertainment to start your workday. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It's almost Halloween, one of my favorite holidays. Oh my gosh, I can't wait. I hope you guys are enjoying the fall wherever you are. And we're going to talk about policies and procedures. Now, I know what you're thinking. Boring. Okay, I get it. Here's the thing though. We're coming to the end of the year, and you all know it is a best practice to update your policies and procedures at the end of every year so you roll them out January 1, nice and crisp and clean and all compliant. It should be part of what you have on your list every year. In October, when the new laws come out for most of us, in some states they come out in July. Once you get the new laws for the next year, you take a look at them, you figure out what you have to update, and you get it done. We do a ton of handbooks for clients, and they start rolling in about mid-October because that's when the new laws have been passed by the California legislature, and we make sure they have them back so that they can distribute them January 1. Every year you should have a new handbook. And this is not Full Employment for Lawyers Act, right? You don't need your employers all the time to do these handbooks. You can do updates. You can get updates from your counsel that you can incorporate into your documents. But you've got to have policies and procedures that, number one, are accurate. Okay, so they're legally compliant and they reflect what you actually do. So let's talk about both of those for a minute. Legally compliant means you've got to be reviewing your policies and procedures all the time as a new case comes down, as a new law is passed, as we get a new interpretation from a government entity that will sometimes require that you change your practices and your procedures. And that's one of those things that we have to really put on a list, put it on our agenda, because before you know it, it's January and you forgot to do it. You're too busy. HR is too busy to just wake up in the middle of October and say, oh gosh, yeah, I guess I better get our handbook ready to roll, or I better get our policies updated. So you've got to have this on your regular annual schedule. This is just what you do. In the fall, you update your policies and procedures. Now, having them be legally compliant is one thing. The other thing they have to do is accurately reflect your practices. So, basic example, your policy says we will do annual performance evaluations on or near the employee's anniversary date. Sounds good, but do you do it? If you don't, take it out. Because even though we have language in the handbook that says this isn't a contract, you're an at-will employee, if you tell them they're going to get performance evaluations on an annual basis on or near their anniversary, that is a contract. You're making them a promise. Don't make promises in your policies and procedures that you can't follow through with or you won't follow through with because you've decided you don't want to. So the handbook reviews are not only to determine if you're complying with new laws, they're also to make sure that what you say you are doing in those policies and procedures is actually accurate, that you're taking the steps that you say you're going to be taking. And if you're not, you need to get rid of it. It doesn't buy you anything to say you're going to do evaluations if you don't. It's better to just not include it, right? Remember that preparing manuals and policies and handbooks, it's an art, right? You have to think strategically about what information you're going to include, how detailed you want to be, what you want to leave out so that you have more flexibility as the employer. There's a whole strategy that goes into putting these documents together. So make sure that you're on the same page with the other folks in your organization, whether they be HR or operational leaders, about what our policies are going to be and how we're going to enforce them and how we're going to make sure that people understand what we expect. I reviewed a handbook one time that had 28 pages on how to clean the kitchen. Okay. They had a kitchen in this office. The office manager was very upset because people didn't do their dishes and they left food around, and they left food in the refrigerator over the weekend or long holidays. And she wanted it all handled. So what she did is she wrote this huge 28-page document within the handbook about everything from use 2 squirts of Windex on this, and use, 3 dishwasher cleaning thingies that you put in the cycle to make the dishes clean. I mean, literally everything you could imagine. She wanted people to take off their shoes when they were on the kitchen floor. What? You're working in an office. This is crazy talk. And of course, nobody did it. So when I saw the policy, I said, so you want them to take off their shoes in the office when they're in the kitchen? Do they do that? No. Well, then, do you want them to do that? I don't really care. Well, then take it out of the handbook. Don't include things in your policies and procedures that you're not actually going to do. Now, the third thing I want you to remember about policies and procedures is they have to be understandable. Don't write them in legalese. Don't cross-reference a million different things and use different acronyms for things. And you can't expect people to understand what you're talking about. Keep it simple. Keep it simple. Make sure they understand exactly what you are expecting and what you are saying you're going to do. These policies and procedures are a two-way street. You're telling the employee what you're going to do, and you're telling the employee what your expectations are for them. And you have to think of it that way so that you can make the strategy call about what information do you want to include. Now, the fourth thing I want you to think about is how you're going to identify revisions to the policy. So one of the best ways to do that is have it in the footer for the document, a revised date. So that way, when a plaintiff who's suing you produces a policy and they say, I got this when I was hired, if the footer says it was just released last year and they were hired in 2021, then you know that is not the policy they got when they were hired. So I believe every policy needs to have a date, a revised date on every page so that it's very clear where that document came from if it's being produced. The other thing that comes up in this area is how you distribute your handbooks, right? So part of making sure that they're updated correctly is getting the information out to the employee. You don't always have to do it in a physical form. You can post it on the intranet, right? You can say, here's our handbook. Here are our policies. Here's what we want you to know, right? So when you're looking at updating the handbook, you also have to think about the logistics or your policy manual or whatever it is you're distributing. You want to think about, okay, how am I going to get this to the employees? Is it going to be sent via email? Is it going to be a link that they get? Is it going to be something where they just go on our website to a portal and they access that portal? But you want to think about all of those different logistical things, because it does you no good to update a policy or procedure, a manual, a handbook, if the employees don't know that it's been updated. If the employees don't understand, okay, this is what has changed. Now, another thing I want you to think about in this area is once you get these policies updated for the year, you should have a meeting. You should have a meeting with your employees and you should explain to them, hey, we, as you know, we update our handbook, our policies, our manual every year. During this meeting, we talk to you about the most significant changes. You don't have to give them a redlined copy. You just talk about the most significant changes, any new policies and procedures, and then you get their signature. You can do that via Zoom. You can get the signature in a lot of different ways. You can just have them reply on the email. You can do whatever you want, but they need to acknowledge that they've had the opportunity to review that new policy or that new handbook. And when you do it that way, when you explain what the changes are, number one, if you're making changes that benefit the employee, which many of us do because we're constantly evaluating bonuses and protections that we give our employees, and we want to try to make sure that they're getting all of the best practices. As we talked about a few weeks ago with Brooke Kozak, workplace culture is critical. So we want to do everything we can to maintain that culture or to promote that culture, positive culture. So we may be offering benefits or other things that we haven't offered in the past. It's a great opportunity at that meeting to let everybody know what the new benefits are going to be, what changes you've made, any other sort of legal compliance issues. It's always good to let your employees know, we've updated the handbook to comply with applicable law. There have been some changes, and this is what we've done. These are the policies that we've updated. So you can either give an entire copy of the handbook again. You could, if you're in a small workplace, you just print it out for everybody. You can post it on your intranet and then just tell them where the changes were made. You should look at this policy, and this policy for the updated language. Many employers will put the update for the policy in like a header on that policy, because not all of your policies are updated at the same time in larger organizations. So you may actually want to have some sort of built-in method where you say, when these changes were adopted. But whatever you do, I want you to remember that process does matter. How we get the information, how we process the information, how we explain the information to our employees is all very critical. So when you're talking about policies and procedures and you're talking about handbooks and manuals, and you want to hold your employees accountable for what is contained in those documents, you've got to do it in a fair way. You've got to give them notice that they're going to be held accountable. So it's very important to think about, in your organization, consistent with your culture, what is the best way to do that? How do you want to communicate to folks that there have been some changes? You want them to review the changes, analyze the changes, and you want them to let you know if they have questions. So that's why this is, a relatively significant annual endeavor, but it doesn't have to take a lot of time or cost a lot of money. It's really about building on what you already have. So many times we'll do handbooks for a client, and then at the end of the year, we'll send an email saying, okay, these are the new changes that you need to know about. And they can decide whether they want to incorporate them. They can have us incorporate them. They can do it however they want. But the idea is we're communicating that there is an expectation there that, look, we have changed things and you need to know what those changes are. Obviously, when you're doing training on your policies and procedures, your supervisors and managers are going to get much more in-depth training because they're the ones who have to implement and enforce the policies and procedures, right? So you're going to want them to have input into what makes sense. But if you look at this idea of really creating documents that are useful, we're not just crossing it off our list saying, okay, I did a handbook, fine, it's done. Okay, I did a leave policy, good, it's over. All right, I did a workplace violence prevention policy, now I'm done. No, think of it as a living, breathing document. Think of it as something that is going to change not only as the law changes, but as your culture changes, as your expectations change, as your employees' expectations change. I mean, COVID was a huge game changer in so many ways. Now we have many more people who want to work at home and are trying to find ways to be able to do that. So think about in your organization, when you're implementing policies, just because you could hold an employee accountable to something doesn't mean you necessarily should. You want to make strategic decisions about what you're asking them to do and what you're telling them they should not be doing. Because at that point, you can actually take a step back and look at what you've done and why you've done it, and you'll be able to defend a policy change as not being discriminatory or not being in retaliation for something somebody did. So the way I like to think about policies and procedures is really like your guidebook, right? Like when I go on a vacation, I always get a guidebook because I want to know where are the best restaurants, where should I sleep, what tours do I want to take. These are really your guidebooks of what you're going to offer to your employees, what steps you're going to take if something happens. For example, the employee introduces a virus into your computer network. Okay, what steps are you going to take? What kinds of expectations do you have? You're not going to outline everything. The point of these policies and procedures is to outline what you're required to give employees by law, and then what you're going to do for them, whether or not it's legally required. So what steps you're going to take so that they understand these are the rules of the road, right? This is the way things happen. Now, Julia Melnico, who is our handbook guru, she is going to be doing our annual handbook webinar. You can register for it online on our website. You also want to get a place in our legal update. It is filling up super quick. And those of you who are clients know we have a special little treat for you in terms of whether you want to, I don't want to ruin the treat for you. Let me just say, clients are going to get a special treat when it comes to the legal update, okay? So register for it now, get signed up. Make sure that you have got it on your calendar. We've got a couple of sessions, and we may also be adding another session. So there's a lot of interest this year because there's a lot going on. So make sure you do find a place in there. Everyone, thank you so much for your time today. I love doing this podcast with you. If any of you have any suggestions or comments, I am all ears. Thank you so much for your years of support. I don't think I told you guys last week I went to my 30th law school reunion, which was quite something. I got to tell you, it was so fun to see everybody. So thanks, everyone. Keep up the good work. I'll see you next time. Workplace Wake Up, including our guests and hosts, do not provide legal advice in this podcast. Do not act upon any of the information discussed in this podcast without first consulting a licensed attorney in your jurisdiction. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to spread the word, please share it with others. Post about it on social media and/or rate and review it. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and email us at info@shawlawgroup.com.